Hey guys, welcome to Melanin United. On this video, we're going to talk about Ghana's president and his meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and their delegation in the on that African leaders U.S. summit that happened about a couple of days ago, when 49 African leaders went to the U.S. for a couple of days to have a summit with the U.S. government and stuff like that. So Nana Akufo-Addo says some good stuff. Like in this one speech, he was in the U.S. He was talking like Africans got to stop begging. We got to always stop begging and work together, which is true. We know that. That's the Nana Akufo-Addo I want to hear talking like that. But when you have a sit down with the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who is who is an enemy, goes around manipulating lots of governments and stuff like that, doing the bid of the U.S. government because he is a part of it. Um, he's a good talker for sure. But yeah, and so Nana Akufo-Addo, the Ghanaian president, sits down and they're talking, and he's talking about Russian the Wagner group that we've talked about in this channel a couple of times, the Russian mercenary group, which is the Wagner group, which the U.S. and the European countries always condemn, and they hate the fact that they're in the African continent, and they just because Russia irritates them in general, right? The whole Ukraine stuff and just their history with Russia, but yeah, not and the thing is because we talked about also the Sahel region, the region in West Africa in the Sahel, where there's these so-called terrorist group that France needs to be there at all times, and other European armies, other European military operations. Like so, France is there, Germany, Britain's there too, I believe, and I know the Americans are there too. So this so-called terrorist group that's created by the Europeans, what are they called again? The terrorist group. They're called um the name will come to me, but yeah, the terrorist group that the Europeans have created, and I'm pretty sure specifically France, probably with the help of the Americans, but the Europeans in general created these terrorist group in the Sahel region to destabilize these countries like Mali, Niger, Guinea-Bissau, countries like that, right? And we talked about how Russia started coming into Central Africa, and then that Western Sahel region and stuff, and they've actually started helping those countries by giving them military equipments because the U.S. don't give them like sophisticated and good military equipments as Russia does, right? Obviously, Russia doesn't give them their best, but they don't give them no toy equipments like the U.S. would, right? They give them actually good equipments and stuff like that, and again, they're not like that's why African countries cooperate with Russia and China, because as much as we don't always have to, like especially with China and stuff like that, but the thing is Russia and China, they don't do what the Europeans do when they trade with us, or when they're like giving you money, or if they giving you military equipment, they won't be like, okay, you need to do this, do that, accept and promote LGBTQ, take these medicines and all this type of stuff by force. That's what the Europeans always do, right? So yeah, so the Russian Wagner group it's a private military contract group, and they say mercenaries that's been working in the operating in Central Africa, but now specifically we're talking about the Sahel region, so Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and it's right. Burkina Faso is right, I believe, on top. Is right on top of Ghana, but it's their neighbor for sure. So, and yeah, and the thing is, when Russia has been the Wagner groups have been operating in those countries, the thing is, the country citizens rather prefer that than France, than Germans, specifically France. And we've talked about France a bunch of times and how they're just throwing temper tantrums and crying about how Mali kicked them out. Mali was the first country in the Sahel to kick them out, ban them, threaten them too, because France keeps. Remember, we talked about France continuously spying, monitoring, and interfering in their airspace of Mali, just because Mali kicked them out because they've been there for so long, right? But no changes happen. But what's funny is destabilizing. It just continues to happen whenever France is there. So They're the first country to kick that a European country out. They kick France out, and they're doing some similar things with Britain and Germany, but they kick France out completely because France totally had the majority control of that area. They kicked France out, and then and they accepted Russia Wagner's group because they seen improvement. That's what Mali did, and then after that, you have Guinea that did the same thing. Guinea, the anti-French sentiment is growing louder and louder in West Africa, specifically the Sahel region. They kicked Guinea. Guinea doesn't want France in there too, and then that became major news. Oh, Russian Wagner groups are doing this and doing that, doing this, doing that, and all these propaganda stuff. And then after Burkina Faso, the same thing. Like all these countries have coups, right? Coup d'états, and then their military leaders, the military chiefs and stuff, the military commanders have become basically the presidents of the country because their presidents were all they're all sellout slave monkeys to the Europeans, right? Being slaves and puppets. So that's why a lot of times the coup d'états happen and stuff like that. But a lot of coups also happen by the orchestration by the Americans and the Europeans, right? Which are the same people. Um, yeah, but so and then remember how we talked about how Ghana. You remember the ECOWAS group, which is created by France, which is you know what I mean. Like it's Ghana. I've talked about this Ghana, Ivory Coast, I believe, and a couple more West African countries, and how ECOWAS sanctioned Mali just because Mali didn't want France and kicked France out, and ECOWAS sanctioned them. And then as soon as Guinea started not wanting France, and they started working with Russia, then ECOWAS, I'm pretty sure yeah, ECOWAS sanctioned Guinea too, or a couple of their military leaders. ECOWAS did the same thing because they're getting these orders from France and stuff. I already talked about this kind of stuff. And then now that the Wagner groups are operating in Burkina Faso, now Mali, now not ECOWAS, the Wagner group, the Russian groups are operating in Burkina Faso, and now you have, and with this meeting, Nana Akufo-Addo, the president of Ghana, he's the way he's telling Secretary Blinken, this is what he's talking about. He's like, Russia's operating in our northern border. We need you guys to confront Russia. We need help and stuff like that. Though, look at that. Like, he says some good stuff like Ghana, Ivory Coast need to produce more and see more of the profit of the cocoa because, 80% of chocolate comes from Ivory Coast and Ghana. So I'm totally on board with that message. And when he said African countries need to stop begging, I'm on board with that message too. But when you go to the Europeans, in this case I'm talking about America, which is the Europeans, when you go to these Europeans and say, Russia's operating in our northern border, we need you to come, we need to work with you guys, we need help to confront them and stuff like that. Why is Russia even operating in the northern border in the first place? Because of these terrorist groups, right? And did Russia create these terrorist groups, or did the Europeans? See what I'm saying? That's what I'm. So like, and the interviews towards each other, like their meeting, it sounded so like, it sounded like you're basically showing them like, okay, yeah, you're talking about us not begging, but you're begging basically. You're looking like a slave, Nana. The way you're saying, yeah, you're snitch. The way it sounds like he's snitching, like he's telling his mom or dad, like, mom, big brother is doing this, he stole this, or dad, sister is doing this and she won't return this. That's the way he basically is, like, it sounds like he's snitching on Russia. Russia wouldn't have to be there if if you guys can. Russia wouldn't have to be there if we could all work together and take these kick these so-called terrorist groups out of West Africa, out of the whole continent, but specifically West Africa in this situation. If Ghana was working with Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, Niger, they wouldn't need the Russians. And even though, like, Russians haven't done anything bad yet that I have to talk about, but if they do, I'll talk about it. But yeah, no, but Ghana, Guinea, Niger, Mali, I would rather, even though I'm cool with Russia and I like Russia, I'd rather you guys work together as Africans. We work together as Africans to kick these so-called terrorist groups out instead of calling countries, Russia, come help us. And Russia, come help us. Europe, come help us. America, come help us. And I know, like, at least I know why, like, at least I know why Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso call it Russia, because they know France and these other European countries are interfering in their internal affairs, their politics, and all these internal issues. They know they're interfering so much and all that. So and the thing is, Ghana and all these other countries are not helping because your slave master is not letting you help. That's the truth. The Europeans is not letting you help. So they have to call a power country to come help. And Russia, from what how the citizens are reacting, it seems like Russia is doing a lot more to take care of these so-called terrorist group, and they've been there way shorter than France and these other European countries that so-called claim to be helping them. But Russia's been there for a little bit, but they've made a lot more progress. So that's why these countries, these citizens, these African citizens want Russia. They prefer Russia instead of European countries. In general, we just want Africans, but because the Europeans don't know how to stay away and be mosquitoes, then they always interfere. So we need to call someone, and at least their enemy. The enemy of your enemy is my friend. You see what I'm saying? So the European enemy is our friend that we're cool with, and that's Russia, right? So yeah, and that's how like this slave, the way he was talking, this slave Nana man. As soon as he snitched and all that about Russia and stuff like that, then guess what happens? Automatically, the IMF gives Ghana $3 billion loan. Now, do you guys believe me when I say all these so-called organizations, these so-called institutions, World Bank, IMF, World Health, UN, G20, NATO, all these organizations, NGOs, all these organizations, like these big institutions like World Health, IMF, World Bank, all that stuff, I told you it's controlled by the Europeans, right? Didn't I tell you guys that? But you guys, a lot of you think, well, it's called World Bank. It's called International Monetary Fund. It's called United Nations. So it's all equal. Like no one's a boss. It's us all equal. We're all together as a world. Nah. Like I told you, these headquarters are located in the U.S. and they're controlled by the U.S. and the European countries, and they're funded by them. So I told you these are their little organizations and their institutions to try to control the world, and they've made these specifically institutions to control Africa. That's the thing. That's why they try to monitor us and control us with these institutions. See, Ghana, you did good. So you told us Russia's bad, and you did good. So we gave you an allowance. See, so good boy. Come snitch to us, and we'll give you an allowance. $3 billion automatically gets sent to Ghana. Why didn't it get sent before? Nana talked about Russia and all that in their northern border in operating in Burkina Faso, and then also he says, and Burkina Faso allocated a mine to Russia. Like, that's okay. I don't want us to be giving our mines away to foreigners, to other countries, because that's a lot of job loss for our people. Like, come on. But do you know how much mines the Europeans have? Do you know how much mines the Europeans and the Americans have in Africa? And then to complain about Russia having taken a mine from Burkina Faso is so hypocritical, Nana. Like, come on, man. And then also he says, the way he's talking is like, we're good slaves, and we're good puppets, so you can trust us. And then he says, it's like he knew, it's like they talk behind the scene, like, okay, if you talk about this and that, then we can give you a loan. See what I'm saying? And that loan, they still probably have to do some stuff, except more LGBTQ and stuff, because that's what the kind of stuff that's been happening in Ghana. I see Dwayne Wade and Gabriella Union going there. I don't know what's going on, but with that whole Dwayne Wade child thing, where his son turned, I think his son is doing procedures to turn into a girl, if not already. But like that kind of promotion and stuff they're pushing, and they're trying to bring it to Ghana and all that kind of stuff. It's like, this is the kind of stuff the Europeans do if they give you money. You gotta accept their way of life. They don't respect. They don't give a damn about African cultures. They're disrespectful as hell. They have no respect. So they force you to do stuff. But also Nana is like, so he not only said Russians in the northern border, but he said we have a lot of things we agree with, like with Ghana and America. Like, we did, like, he what else he said? He said we agreed and we condemned Russia, the invasion of Ukraine, just because a lot of African countries didn't condemn Russia, right? But some of the African countries that did, which Ghana, is one of them, that's the African countries that, that's in the pockets of the European, that's still puppets of the Europeans. You see, he's being a good boy. He's saying we even condemn we are with you guys in condemning Russia and the invasion of Ukraine, and now this, and this is how they're puppets and slave of the Europeans, when they talk like them or use the words that they're using. Ghana has been a democratic country for the past. This has been the most democratic Ghana has been. Um, the Sahel region of West Africa has been democratic, but these past 6 months and the Russians and all that, and he kept talking about democratic, and we want to be, and we value democratic views and democracy and all that. And who always pushes those words, democratic, democracy? The Europeans, the Americans. See how Ghana's copying them, like. And what do you mean that this is the most democratic Ghana has ever been? So we haven't. So there wasn't no Ghanaians thousands of years ago. There wasn't Ghanaians thousands of years ago before the Europeans that was democratic. The definition of democratic, because when the Europeans say democratic, they are dictators. They're not no democratic. That's a smokescreen that they use for you guys, so they can do all their garbage and filth. They're not democratic, but the actual definition democratic, what it like what it says on their definition, Africa has been that democratic for the longest time before the European was even on this planet. So what is he talking about? But yeah, so I know you're working for them. You use the words that they use a lot, democratic. You're talking bad about their enemy, and you're saying we need help against Russia. You sanctioned the Sahel countries that's working with Russia. Like you sanction them just like the Europeans always sanction people. Um, you voted in favor of Ukraine, and you voted exactly how the slave master wants you to vote, and then you talk about it, and then you condemn African countries that work with Russia just like the Europeans do, and like, nah, this look like a slave move, man. Come on, I'm gonna call it how I see it. You said a lot of good things before, and I like it, but I know overall you're still in the pockets of the Europeans. You went to Birmingham in England, I believe, for your university and all that. You copy the way they talk. You let them push certain agendas in Ghana, and you, like, nah, this is totally bad, Nana. Like, if these American military start coming into Ghana, uh, if the American military, the European military start operating in Ghana, that's on you, Nana, and you're gonna receive the backlash for that. If anything happens, I'm telling you right now, and then there start being destabilizing situations in Ghana, and more destabilizing situations in those neighboring countries, then that's on you. But yeah, thanks for listening to this video, guys. Like, comment, subscribe.